Right, we might get started. It's I can't see anyone else waiting to come in at the moment. So I'd just like to start the meeting by acknowledging that today we're all sitting on different locations, and I'd like to recognise that we're working across many different lands of various First Nations people. I acknowledge the land that I'm working on today is the land of the Ngarrindjeri people, and I recognise that they are and always have been the traditional owners of this land. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and I also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be with us today.
Me. All right, thank you for coming. Welcome. So this is really a meet and greet, and for us to get to know you and everyone to come along with open minds and hearts, and think of this as a space where we can challenge our thoughts, assumptions that we've got in the community, and talk about the collective well-being of our region. We're focusing on how we can encourage our community to identify the strengths that we already possess and how we can tap into these to improve the overall community well-being. And if anyone's got any questions, can they be put in the chat? And if you don't know what that is, give us a hoy, we'll let you know. But yes, thank you for showing up and welcome. Amy. So Jamie, we're after the vision cloud.
Sure.
There we go. So really, as Leah said, tonight is just a get to know you sort of session. We've sort of feeling, because we've met by Zoom previously, that we haven't really made that connection like we would if we were all sitting in one space. So we thought it was important to take the time to, you know, have a bit of a, who are you? Tell us why you're here. But what we wanted to do was just share a couple of really quick things. So one is the vision cloud. So as you can see on your screen, I won't read it out loud, you can all read it, but that's the vision that we're working towards with this initiative. And yeah, it's a very basic, straight to the point sort of statement. And that will, you know, we all need to try and keep that in mind when we're doing whatever it is that we're doing in this space. So Leah's going to also share one other thing, which is about the journey that we're on with our town.
Can everyone see that? Does that need to be a bit wider?
A little bit wider would be good. Yeah, that's better.
There you go.
Perfect, Jamie.
Thank you. So, so we're in the discovery phase, and I was going to point to it, but that's probably not helpful for you lot. So up until sort of the end of July, we are just discovering things about our region and engaging with others. So this is what we're like tonight's about, and also moving forward to have people go out into the community and do this as well. But we're also looking at what we might think about the community and then challenging that. So, you know, for example, the mind's gone blank, but you might have a belief about the community, and so we're actually asking people to challenge that and bring it back to a question that you might actually ask to find out more about that. So then late July, we'll go into testing our theories and finding out, you know, doing things. We'll actually be doing things then. So right now we're talking to people and really discovering what we can about the community. So I hope that's clear. And then in November, we'll write up the plans to present to Faye Fuller Foundation But yeah, so is that clear? Probably as mud.
Jamie, would you turn that screen off for me for the next part, just so I can make sure I can see everyone? Thank you. So now we're just going to actually, as I said, do a bit of a get to know you thing. If there's anyone that doesn't want to do that, just shake your head and I won't call you. Is everyone happy to do that? Did you just shake your head, Jamie? Sorry, love, you don't get a choice. All right, okay, so I'm just going to go around my screen and we'll just go from there. So, Mike, you are first. So it's really just a bit of a, tell us who you are while you're here, what you're hoping to get from this initiative, what you might think you might be able to help with.
Mike McDowell. I'm presently chairman of the Men's Shed and involved with 2 other gatherings of mainly elderly men in the Mannum area. Have been involved with Graham Jenke and Darren Lovell in the past with Men's Watch programs, suicide prevention, Cambrai, Sedan, Borough, Bowhill, run workshops and been involved with that. And taking that back to the Men's Shed now, on occasions where people do come in with depression and what have you, you sit there and you get a quiet spot, grab a cuppa, and you just listen and you give them some support. And so there is help out there, that's all. Yep, only that.
Thank you, Mike. Next on my screen is Bobby.
Hi everyone. I think I know everyone, or I've met everyone except for Karen that I can see on my screen. So I'm the Wellbeing Leader at Mannum Community College. So I guess in terms of the southern region of the Mid-Murray Council area, we're a big, you know, an youth advocacy group in many respects when it comes to wellbeing and mental health. So we try to support students in developing the skills and the strengths to be able to face the challenges that are going to come in their lives. And we have, you know, various waves of intervention. So there's a lot of work done on prevention and positive school community. And we're hoping, and we work, I guess, with some outside agencies to try and connect, you know, with sporting groups and scouts and other sort of more positive mindset type activities. And then we have, and same with John, I'm guessing that we have the same, then we have wave 2, which is sort of interventions, small group interventions, and it might be about grief and loss, it might be about mindfulness, it might be about, you know, literacy and learning challenges that they have. And then we'll have a Pointian group of people in our wave 3 interventions where we'll look for external expert support, maybe CAMS or supporting children and youth, or DV, domestic violence support services, or, you know, Headspace. So we work quite actively with the mental health and wellbeing of young people.
Thanks, Bobby. John, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Bobby, you said it very well around the wave 1, 2 and 3. Sort of similar focus at Swan Reach, particularly through the, used to be, it's now called BU, but it used to be Kids Matter, Mind Matters sort of programs about promoting mental health, and the end goal is to actually give assistance to not just students but families suffering from mental ill health, I suppose. And really it's just about raising the awareness. It's just incredible around our community and our Mid-Murray Council area just how deep it runs. Mike, you know, the things that you're talking about there with Cambrai, Sedan and Bowhill, just be able to chat with other blokes is quite an amazing experience. I think that's a wonderful thing, and really just want this, our town, to hit it for our council area and for the majority of our people. So very excited, but you know, there's a lot of work for us to do.
Yeah. Thank you, John. John forgot to mention that he also joined the core team this week. So we're very excited about that, to have a few more hands on deck. And Caitlin is another lady who's joined, but she actually has unwell children, so she's not here tonight. So thank you, John. Next on my list is Simone.
Hi, I'm Simone, counsellor in the Shearer ward. Also mum of 3, have lots of interactions with local kids, with my kids, sporting clubs and things like that. But also I'm the business manager at Aminia, so we have 60 residents that, you know, I think a lot of them would love to be involved in this program, and also 28 independent living units in Blanchetown and Manham where, you know, people often don't feel connected. So hopefully we can connect them using what I learn or help, you know, learn from this.
That'd be really valuable, Simone, I think. Particularly, we would love to have some of your residents involved. I think that would be wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Napoli, you're next on my list.
Hi, hi everyone. I'm really encouraged to hear the connections that are already forming and the input from the communities, and I am really excited to be part of this as a collaborative involvement across the region. Really encouraged to see the enthusiasm and the commitment that's being shown. I really would like to support whatever way I can, and in my involvement through the practice and whatever input I can give. But one of the comments that Caitlin and I particularly, I work with Caitlin as a midwife here in the Manham practice, and that's actually understanding the importance of building the family unit and supporting the family unit and helping to encourage that connection between children and parents in a safe space, and also allowing for early intervention. We're talking about the interventions around mental health in adults and children, but really looking at some of that preventative approach and supporting families and identifying families at risk and those the vulnerable children. So that's a particular interest and passion of mine, and I'd love to be able to give input whatever way I can.
Thank you, Dr. Napoli. Next on my list is Karen.
Hi everybody, my name is Karen McCall. I'm the advisor to the Office of the Premier's Advocate for Suicide Prevention. That's the Honourable John Dawkins, and the Premier's Council on Suicide Prevention, and also we have a whole of government issues group on suicide prevention, which consists of 23 senior executives from every government agency that meet monthly on suicide prevention. So the issues group is a working group of the Premier's Council, and then that's underpinned, the framework's underpinned by approximately 40 now suicide prevention networks across the state, of which one of those is Mid-Murray. I attend a number of those meetings. I don't get to all of them, I must say, because a number of them meet on the same night, unfortunately, but I do get around to as many as I can, and just really always encouraged by our place-based approach that we have in South Australia, which of this is a great example of that. And all of our networks actually bring something different, and I guess the value that I see in working with our suicide prevention networks is, although there's 40 of them across the state, they're all very individual, and what's important about them is that the information and the events and the intel that they actually bring to the likes of myself comes from the community. It's not us going and actually telling them at all what they need to be doing in their community. It's so important that it's actually coming from the community back to us, and it's a really powerful tool to actually be able to actually gather that intelligence from attending forums such as this and those network meetings to actually inform change in policy and governance at the highest level.
Thank you, Karen. It's really great to have you here tonight, and I'm getting a bit excited about the level of interest that we're getting from all different areas and sectors, and yeah, it's fantastic. So next on my list is Leah.
Oh, I didn't think we were speaking. I'm not prepared.
We just want to know who you are, Leah.
Oh, good. Yes, so I know everybody on the screen pretty much, so you all know me. I'm Leah. I've worked for NGOs for years. I've got a counselling practice here. I work for Arana. I'm a support worker. I'm a residential care worker. Oh, what else? Anyway, I'm very enthusiastic about this project. I think it's such a great opportunity, and I've banged on about that before, so I won't bore you with that again. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Leah. Leah's also been one of the driving forces behind this work. I'm just going to throw that in there, Leah. Okay, Jamie.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamie. I do work for Minmurray Council in a position that would definitely not normally jump into this space, but thankfully I've had the opportunity to jump in. My passion is certainly learning from lived experience. I think those that have been there, they know what works and what doesn't, and can give us a whole lot of ideas that we perhaps, wouldn't even think of. So I've actually been working on this, now since August last year, and am actually really excited to see it start coming together. I know as a core team today, we had a really great conversation around testing our assumptions and, who we can actually talk to test those assumptions. Who are those interesting people in the community that can share their insights with us, from all different types of perspectives as well. Like Amy said, I'm really excited that Karen, you're here, Dr. Napoli, everyone else, Simone, it's great to see elected members be involved in this as well. And Mike, the men's sheds are certainly key in all of this space. And Bobby and John, I know just from a personal perspective, I'd love to learn a lot from you guys in regards to the youth, in ways that I can support my own children. So yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell, and yeah, really excited to see everybody and start getting it off the ground and having those really great conversations.
Thank you, Jamie. So I'm Amy Johnson. I know most of you, but not all of you. So I also work for council with Jamie. I'm the Family Connections Coordinator and also part of the core team working on the Our Town initiative. I have a history mainly in youth work, working with young people in all sorts of spaces, mental health always being a really big component of that. I've also done a lot of work for many years with carers, so carers caring for a whole range of different people and different issues, but again, mental health being a big contributing factor. So yeah, I'm really excited about this initiative too, and I think, the fact that it's so community-led is what will make it work instead of, and I can't remember which one of you said it, I think it was you, Karen, but I'm a big believer in a lot of companies, services, whatever, come in and say, right, we're going to do this for your community and this is what you need. And people go, that's not what we need, that's not what we want, and it doesn't work. So I really like the fact that it's a very different grant opportunity. I've never seen a grant like it ever, and I've worked with lots and lots of grants, but I've never seen one like this. And it also has a really good underlying support structure. So there's data experts, there's social innovation experts, there's this whole range of other things that we can tap into to make sure that we get it right. So now I might just go a little bit off-road with the agenda, and the girls will laugh because they know I like to do that, but we've got a bit of extra time. So I just thought I'd give you a really quick update of where we are. So since we last met, we've had some more people join the core team. There's been lots of conversations around how we're going to manage the funding. We're looking at employing a contractor to actually help us lead and drive this work. We're all doing it on top of things that we're already doing. So we've identified that, you know, everybody's time poor. So we're looking forward to that, and we're putting together a job description, for want of a better word, I suppose. What else have we been doing, ladies? I'm sure there's a heap of it. Can you think of anything in particular?
We've been having a lot of conversation around some assumptions that we hold in the community, the different things that, you know, may actually be an issue or may not be an issue in Mid-Murray in particular. Did we want to have a chat about some of those aims?
Yeah, we can do. The other thing, I guess, is we're about to start those conversations with people. So going out into the communities and saying, tell us what you know, tell us what works, tell us what doesn't, what do you do for yourself, you know, all of those sorts of things. And yeah, to try and pull that information together. We have a sad lack of data in the Mid-Murray region. So I guess one of the data experts said, you've got to create your own data. You need to go and talk to people and gather those stories and form your data out of that. So that's, I guess, is a big part of what we've been doing in this beginning of this planning phase. So, yeah.
One of the key things that we really, really want to drive is that we want to hear from the voices that aren't always heard. You know, we do have a heavily involved community, but we want to make sure that we hear everyone's voice, you know, and sometimes for, you know, a multitude of different reasons, some people aren't always, you know, their voice isn't always brought to the table. So we're really keen on trying to work out who those people are, what they might have to share, and what insights that they could share with us.
Yeah. So shall we go into, I guess we're at the point where we're trying to see how people might like to be involved. So I'm not sure if everybody read the email they got. I know I'm pretty guilty of skimming things quite often, but we did put a couple of questions in there for you to think about. And there's a lot of people that actually couldn't make it tonight because they had clashing commitments. So we will do this again, but I might hand over to you, Leah, if you're ready to move into that section.
Sure. So Jamie's going to organise some breakout groups, but if you hadn't read the questions, oh, sorry, something else just popped up on my screen. That's very professional of me. So we're asking, what do you know about mental health and wellbeing in our region? So like, how do you maintain your mental health? What's working? What could be improved? What does a mentally healthy region look like for you? And how you may be able to be a part of the team or other ways to be involved. And we have a whole range of ideas that we've come up with, and we'll share them after, or if you want any sort of clues or hints or tips, we can share them now. So I will be guided by you on that. So does anyone want to have a quick squiz now? Yep.
I reckon so share them now, Leah.
Yeah. All right. So if we could do that, Jamie, that would be grand.
Have you got them? Nah.
Can someone else? I'm just in the middle of doing the room. Sorry.
No, you're okay.
Oh, that's okay.
I've got it now.
Yeah. I emailed the yeah. Well,
can you see my screen now?
I need to make it wider. Much wider.
Yeah, hang on. There we go. Oh, I'll scroll down once we've. So yeah. Is that better?
Everyone see that? So when Jamie was talking about people that sort of are hard to reach, if we can get ideas or get connections to those people, that would be just fabulous. If anyone knows of any, or you know of people that know of people. So I mean, the whole idea is to get right into the community and also the region, like not just Mannum. We just definitely need to get out and about as well. So people with lived experience wherever they are, people who've got energy and passion for community well. So yeah, some doers, that would be awesome. And like I said before, assistance to engage with the disengaged any way at all. If anyone's got an interest in data, please come forward. Two of our team are terrified of data. So, but local mapping of community strengths and how people connect across the region, support to identify outreach services available, a big picture person, and a person that can see ways to work towards that. We need people on the ground to do these, to speak to people and come back to us. So if you're in a position like Mike, you've got a captive audience in the car when you're driving around, driving people places, that sort of thing. And maybe it gets recorded on your phone or something like that. So those sorts of ideas we thought about. Where am I? I've lost my place. Anyway, you'll be reading them, I'm sure. Oh, technology. I think that's sort of part of the contractor role, but we are definitely exploring a variety of options there. And yeah, if somebody's able to do that voluntarily, that's fantastic. We also thought about getting school people involved in that if that's something that needs more discussions. Business partners, anybody that's got contacts with actual businesses that we can chat to, that would be great. And yeah, if there's anything else, please tell us. So that's a rough idea, rough list that we put together. So if we go into the breakout rooms.
I was just going to say too, Leah, we're really, really, really open to if you have other suggestions of how people might be able to help. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just some suggestions. I'm just going to throw it out there. And again, the girls are going to kill me. I'm just wondering if, because it's a small group, do we want to just do it as a small group instead of going into breakout? We were anticipating more numbers like the last meeting. So
you read my mind, Amy. I agree.
Yeah, do you think?
Yeah,
let me just get rid of this. I just think if we just do it, is everyone happy with that? Shake your head if you're not. Yeah, I just think it's more personal and we can bounce off each other. The girls are going to kill me. They hate it because they always jump off the agenda. But
no,
you never know,
that's fine.
So
no, I'm glad.
So yeah, I don't think it has to be a formal thing. We're doing really well for time, so people can just jump in and we can have a chat about it, about how we can do some of these things.
Go, Simone. You're still on silent.
Oh, there you are.
Keep going up and down, up and down. Finally got it. I would like to see youth involved. I see the Murray Bridge Council and the Karoonda Council have some great youth forums, and I think they're the way to our future. They're the ones that, and they do like to speak out. So, but also not just in the schools that are involved, because we have probably 100 kids get on the bus in Mannum and go to Murray Bridge to schools there, so to make sure that we're including them. I know from personal experience, like my son, when he's had mental health issues, it's been really hard to try and get him help because he's always on the bus or, can't see a local doctor, or in Headspace it's too late for him. Yeah, so we've had lots of issues. So I just think the kids are the future, and, if we can get them talking, they can then talk to their parents. And, I think from my experience, when I found out that I had some mental health issues, talking to my parents, and they realised that they had it, but back in their day you didn't talk like you do now. So yeah, I'd really love to see the youth involved.
I think your idea too, and sorry, I don't know the protocol. Am I supposed to call you Councillor Bailey? I'm not very good with protocol. Okay, all right. I don't want to get myself in trouble. Yeah, okay, good. I like it. The other thing that made me think when you said earlier about some of the people from Aminia, I think they're probably some of those unheard voices that we're talking about, not just older people, but people that are actually in a nursing home. I think that's probably another really good aspect that we need to think about. So that's some really good suggestions. Yeah, you go, Mike.
Amy, can I support what you're saying? I think before the virus hit, the Men's Shed visited the Aminia Dementia Group, the men in particular, and they are really starved for male contact in particular, because it's predominantly the care support workers there are female, and that's just the way the industry's gone. But the fellas themselves are starved for just male contact, and it's just talking about bloke stuff. And what we used to do, we'd take all the junk mail from the Men's Shed, catalogues, everything we got hold of, we'd clear our table at the Men's Shed and take it to Aminia and leave it with them. And they would grab those, and it's just junk mail that probably Aminia would not got delivered anyway. But they were starved for that communication, and there's been many a conversation that we had before the shutdown or whatever you call it, with fellas talking about their health issues, their family issues, how they've settled in there and things like that. It's just, you're right, it's a group of people that have probably gone under the radar and just missed that. Families don't visit sometimes, and it's just not a place it's hard to get into now, but it's just, you can drive past the place and not think about it. That's just the way we found it anyway.
And it's looking for that connection, Mike, isn't it? We all need that connection with other people.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're not getting out and about like you would when you're not living in that sort of location, you can get that in lots of different ways. But, you know, I would imagine it would be quite limited. I'm sure they do lots of wonderful things, Simone. That's not what I mean. But I just, you know, those external people coming in and different points of view. And, yeah, I think that's a really good idea, Mike.
Well, we used to take work there for them, but they don't want to do work anymore. They just want to sit and chat. They want to talk.
Fair enough.
Talk in. I don't know.
Fair enough. I think the other space there too, Mike, to attach onto that, I think the CFS is a really important place. We need to be recruiting someone from the CFS, because I think that particularly for men, the CFS is a place that they might actually need that support, and it might be, you know, particularly for farmers and stuff that are really busy, CFS might be the only other type of connection that they have. Yeah. So I think we need to do some work on recruiting someone from the CFS. So if anybody knows anyone from any of the CFSs within the region, please feel free to have a chat with them about it.
Look, can I say from experience with the Men's Watch, the workshops we did in Sudan, they're predominantly for men, and in this particular occasion, a couple of women come and stayed, and it turned out that they were looking for help really early in the piece. They had no support, no school group to network with. There was a supermarket and a pub in Sudan, and the women were predominantly volunteering with emergency services, and quite often they would be doing the retrieval of someone who's committed suicide, and they were suffering. And I think that's what brought it to a head initially. So I don't think it's a gender-related thing. It's in a country town where you're not having readily contact with anybody that's sitting there ready to listen.
Yeah, I know a lot of the women that I've spoken to quite often have married into farming families. So they've moved to live rurally. They don't have their own family around them quite often. They're living on a farm in the middle of nowhere and have very few connections, particularly before their children go to school. Once they go to school, things seem to be a bit better because they make some connections there. Yeah. But I know a lot of women have said they really struggled because they weren't with anyone. How do they make friends with people when they don't see anyone? So I think they're really good points. Thank you, Mike.
Amy, I'm just wondering, just on the farmers, while we're on that topic, according to what I'm looking at, Primary Industries and Resources have the FAB support mentors. Are you aware of those? So you've got, there's 3 listed here for the Murray-Mallee region. There's Robin Kane, John Chase and Brent Fletcher. I'm just wondering whether it would be beneficial to actually link one of those people into the group, because they have capacity to actually cold call on farmers, and I would hazard a guess that they also link into rural business support as well. So I would guess that they would have some intelligence in and around farming and primary production areas that may be doing it a little bit tough. And it may be a way of reaching some of those people that wouldn't necessarily engage in a project like this.
So we've, as a whole, our town have actually met with PIRSA, and we discussed those, that group specifically. What we identified was there wasn't actually anyone within the actual Mid-Murray area, but we also looked at the fact that, you know, our LGA doesn't always tie in with, you know, the other regions. So it's definitely on our town agenda to seek out, you know, we're closely linked with Barossa and stuff like that as well. So linking in with those, and there's actually some more funding coming up through PIRSA, specifically for drought and resilience, and in the bushfire space as well. So thankfully those bits of funding will actually target some of the least heard in our community as well, like within the Mid-Murray. You know I worked with the affected bushfire residents within Mid-Murray, and you know, up until the fires happened, you know, outside of development applications and stuff, they'd never even had any real contact with Mid-Murray as such. You know, they very much identify it with the hills rather than the Mannum type area. So it's really great to see that, you know, we can push those sorts of things out to those tiny corners within the region that aren't always heard as well.
Now, Bobby, I saw you had your hand up just before. Yep.
Yeah, well, I disappeared for a minute there because I had to get my child dinner as a single parent. And that had actually come up though, and a couple of you identify with me, that within the school setting, John, I don't know if it's the same for you, but we have a lot of single parents. So whether or not it's, we've had quite a few new enrolments over the last year, 18 months, who are escaping domestic violence, and for some reason they've come to our area. So some of it is just general, either there was no partner to begin with, or you know, it's been the relationship's broken up. But we have a lot of single parents, some men, not the higher percentage, but and so in terms of the vulnerable children that we see, a lot of them come out of those homes. So if we're looking to reach out to people to have a voice, it'll be a big challenge, but it certainly would be fruitful if we could get some of those voices into what their needs are, because we try so hard to connect with parents, and schools are a kind of a captive audience as well, like the Men's Shed. You know, we've got them and they bring in their children, they don't have a choice, so we can catch them. So 2 key areas for me would be to get the single parent voice represented, because that's a big vulnerability group, and then secondly, the domestic violence, the impact of domestic violence, and whether that's, you know, I would say a lot of it in my experience with our kids is more emotional abuse and control. So restriction of finances and restriction of access to support services. So how we look at DV prevention and support in this area, because we have to tap into the Adelaide Hills Murray Mallee Domestic Violence Support Service, which does have some level of outreach, but it certainly wouldn't go much past Mannum, which makes it difficult for those women who are isolated, who maybe it's the former partner and that's why they're on their own, but it makes them highly vulnerable, and then their kids as well, you know, arrive with trauma. That's it.
Thank you, Bobby. So the other thing we have talked about previously is actually once COVID settles down a little bit, talking with some students at the school, some of the older students, to see how they might like to be involved. And it could just be, you know, sharing their thoughts. It could be that they join one of the teams, like whatever works. So, you know, that I think is another really good way. It'd be nice to have those voices at the table.
I think that you probably need to look at primary and middle school rather than senior, mainly because, you know, whether it's COVID or not, senior kids are pretty stressed out and they struggle to care about anything other than what's going on for them. John, would you agree with me on that one? Not that that's a bad thing, but it's important. So, and we've got really articulate, active, sort of community-minded senior primary and middle school kids that may be more, you know, and then that's early intervention too. They're giving you the voice of the younger student, which is important.
Yeah, I believe with the effects of COVID on our senior secondaries, we've sort of got to leave them alone at this stage as they focus on SACE completion.
Yeah,
it's interesting that you should have that low socioeconomic domestic violence going into Mannum as well. Talking with Di at Truro and other leaders across the Waikerie partnership, you know, there's just a growing number of families who are coming out to their rural areas, single parents or those in domestic violence, those in third, second social dependencies, and the effect on the kids is just enormous.
Something else that came up for me today, Jamie and Larry didn't have a chance to mention it to you, was we've been doing some eCPR training, which is kind of a new response to how to sit with someone who's in distress. But as part of that, they were talking about a new program that they're doing with people that suffered the effects of bushfire in the Cuddly Creek bushfires. And that's something that, you know, that fire did come into our region, and, you know, not a long way into it, but it did come into our region. And I know John will back me up on this because we live quite nearby. After we had a major fire in Eden Valley, I'm not aware of anything, John, I don't know if you are, but I'm not aware of anything in response to how that may have affected people that we could have tapped into.
I think there was a few things on offer, but I don't recall specifics at all.
But yeah, I'm just thinking people that, you know, have suffered with those things too would be really good voices to have to the table, because, you know, natural disasters are a really traumatic event for anyone, and can affect whole communities. So that's something else I think that we might need to tap into, you know, to get some of those thoughts and whatever.
Amy, can I refer to your story of the Eden Valley fires? I think it was Cainton residents were in particular. I think they felt like they were off the map. They were so close to the Barossa it wasn't funny, but yeah, they weren't included. They were part of Mid-Murray's area, and I think they did suffer considerably. And if it wasn't for the strength of a couple of the locals that worked together and built up a little bit of a drive, they probably were really going to suffer badly. And I think they survived on the strength of those locals there. I was involved with Mid-Murray Sports Service at that time, and I know it was hard to service them with supports or any other collection of clothing or food or pet food or whatever to get it out to them. It was hard both ways,
Yeah, I know for us, we had only just moved to the community. We'd only lived here for 2 weeks, so we didn't know anybody. It was a good way to get to know people, I'll give it that. But what I do remember is getting up, you know, in the weeks after the fire, and there was, you know, still trees, it was still, you know, it was all very fresh. But in the weeks after the fire, getting up in the morning and there would be a box of food on my doorstep. And to this day, I don't know where it came from. I have no idea. I've never been able to thank anyone for it. I don't know where it came from. People would just bring it and drop it off, or, you know, so those things were really heartening to see. And I guess they're the things that we're looking for in this community conversations, is around what do people do to support each other to maintain their well-being.
Yeah.
You know, they're really good examples of that. So
I think it would help to start with a map of Mid-Murray Council's area, identify the places where people may have a small community, and include Manham and all the rest of the towns, of course.
Yeah.
But start with that and then work out, tie in the issues that relate to that location, like we did, like's been done with Sedan and Canberra and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you've got a really good point, Mike. Although we're all one region, each town, or whatever you want to call it, community, actually has quite different needs in this, well, in all the spaces, I suppose. So that's the other thing, is actually making sure we capture the information from those individual people in those individual communities around what they need, what they want, what they've got, you know, all of those sorts of things. That's a really good point. I like the map idea.
I think earlier in the piece you referred to CFS. I think they're a great, they've got a foot in the door in all those locations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jamie, were you trying to say something before?
I just wanted to touch on what Bobby was saying, and John, around the single mums and domestic violence, and, you know, lots of people coming to the community either, you know, with or without a partner, or escaping, and those sorts of things. So part of, you know, trying to work out bits and pieces, I actually reached out to the domestic violence officer, because I held an assumption that domestic violence was very much an issue within the Mid-Murray area. And surprisingly, in the last 12 months, they could only find 45 records of police contact, like actual, gosh, what am I trying to say? Reports to police within the whole Mid-Murray community in 12 months. So I found that really, really surprising. And that probably leads into either, you know, people aren't reporting stuff, and that in itself is an issue, and or whether, you know, like me, they've come to find a nice quiet place to settle down without it. So yeah, I think it's definitely an issue that we need to look further into, and SAPOL are definitely engaged in this space, and are wanting to help wherever they can as well. To, you know, they'd obviously love to see some preventative stuff, you know, anything that hits that preventative space will be helpful at, you know, for everyone.
Yeah, Jamie, Bobby hinted on it before. I think a lot of domestic violence is now a lot more emotional and neglect. That's what I'm experiencing at Swan Reach with the kids. There's a lot more neglect and around the emotional abuse rather than the physical abuse, which is really hard to prove, let alone, you know, how do you report that, you know?
Yeah.
It's definitely a space that is not well thought of, let alone known about, I think. And that's, you know, you guys would have to see it probably more than anyone through the kids, because otherwise it just doesn't hit the surface.
Well, if I was to put a percentage on it, probably 95% of my mandatory reports are around emotional and neglect rather than physical. You agree, Bobby? Yep.
Wow. That's really interesting in itself, John.
And that is always they're always really hard to get anything done about too. That's the other thing is, as you said, John, hard to prove, hard to report, hard to do all of those things. So quite often those things just continue to happen, even when there's reports in place, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Napoli, I'd be really interested to see, you know, whether domestic violence and even drug and alcohol abuse is something that you're seeing through the, you know, through your practice as coming through as issues.
Yeah, I'd probably say that those two particular issues around interpersonal violence and drug and alcohol abuse combining with mental health are probably the major contributors I'm seeing in families who are vulnerable and high-risk children coming through, as we're pretty well aware with working with children in our various capacities, the major developmental problems and emotional trauma and the impact that's having on their school performance and their well-being, their psychological long-term well-being. It has some major impacts, and these are the children then will grow up to become parents and have their own children. So we're seeing these cycles, aren't we? And so, and you all raised the really common scenarios of families, particularly women, fleeing and finding remote places to be safe. And unfortunately, those places are often least supported with resources. And so they're being, in many ways, further isolated and become further at risk and vulnerable. So as we're talking, I'm thinking about how to connect in this space, in this group. And I can't see any other way except maybe becoming a meeting place, a safe space for these vulnerable families, these vulnerable parents. And Bobby mentioned about working with young people as well, and the voice of young people. And hopefully the schools can be, you know, facilitating and conduit for some of these young people to speak for themselves as well about their own experiences, and what they see will help them. But it's really, I find that a challenging concept around engaging in an area that is already high risk for these people to be speaking out and connecting and becoming possibly more vulnerable in identifying themselves. So I'm really two minds about how that best would occur, except in some ways it being a meeting place where people just meet and it becomes an opportunity for people just to share ideas, and I'm not sure how best that would occur.
That's definitely, you know, I know from my own personal experience that actually identifying myself and speaking out and, you know, wanting to share anything up until now has been a really, really difficult space for me. So we would certainly, you know, we haven't quite got there with working out the logistics of that, but we'd certainly need to set up those safe spaces and, you know, make sure our conversations are de-identified and all those sorts of things as well.
Yeah.
Quickly just wanted to, I just picked up on Bobby's chat around Mid-Murray Support Service. You know, so a few attempts have been made directly and indirectly with Mid-Murray Support Services. You know, we most certainly feel that they would be an ideal service to be in this space. Unfortunately, we haven't had much feedback from them, but that doesn't mean that we're going to give up, and we'll just keep on trying.
Yeah.
Can I just touch on something that was raised before? I was sort of picking up almost two themes in terms of capacity building in communities around general mental health and capacity building generally, but then also how your community is going to respond in terms of a crisis. So whether that be bushfire, flood, pandemic, whatever the case may be. So I think perhaps when you're looking at, you know, mapping and that discovery exercise, maybe you actually run those parallel with each other, because what you want, I guess, what would be good, and this is like looking at big picture stuff, is to be able to have your general mental health and capacity building and resilience and wellbeing model, but then what can you enact in terms of when a crisis occurs in your region, because you will be touched by flood throughout your region at some point. There's no two ways about that. It's happened in the past, it'll happen again. You will be touched by drought, you'll be touched hopefully not by another pandemic for a while, but who knows, and bushfire, like you've already stated. So I'm just wondering whether, picking up on some of that conversation, Amy, it would be worth engaging someone like Alex Zimmerman, I was involved with Alex for Pinery Fire recovery, and he's also obviously been involved in Cuddly Creek. I'm just wondering whether it would be worth linking into him to have some of those conversations around the response for a crisis.
That's a fantastic idea, Karen. I don't think we thought about it in so specifically, to be honest. Like, I was thinking about, you know, disaster recovery and the impacts there, but not actually about that it is quite a different response to maintaining wellbeing during disaster. So thank you. I've got a feeling that the guy we were talking to today about the ECPR was saying they're working with Alex Zimmerman, Jamie and Leah.
Yeah.
Alex is the local area coordinator, and that's who I've been working closely with. So I can even make that connection.
That's a fantastic idea, yeah.
But yeah, they're linking in with Wellbeing SA to test whether or not ECPR is something that would work in a crisis response, you know, forum. And I can certainly, you know, I think we only had 15 maybe all up, direct and indirectly affected residents, and I spoke to each and every one of them. And you know, I even had a couple of missed calls from one of the guys today that's still having ongoing issues, and so that's certainly, I don't know why I didn't actually think of that, given that I'm working very closely in both spaces. But thank you, Karen. That's definitely something that we'll delve further into.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess what's interesting about that too is, you know, from my lived experience with being involved in Pinery, and I was acting mayor at the time, was that I was on that council for 8 years and only came off at the last election, but what we're actually seeing is community members who are still affected by Pinery now, and it's 5 years out, you know. So, you know, people who, you know, lived on the same property, one house survived, one didn't, the guilt's still there, you know, there's still a raft of stories and information and still some anger around as well, all these years on. So I think how you respond, how you set up this project to look at both responses would be really interesting and I think really beneficial to actually get the best outcome for your money as well.
The other thing that just made me think of, Karen, too, is not just the response in that bushfire space or flood space is probably the other one, but I'm just thinking about, I'm probably the least anxious person you'll ever meet. I'm very chilled, don't really worry. And I live on eggshells every summer now because of that fire, because I know it's a really real possibility. So even for people that haven't actually experienced fire, people that live in a zone with all these fires that we've had the last few years, they've got to be experiencing some of that, even when they haven't been surrounded by it. So, you know, even that sort of stuff that, I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but they're not just necessarily for people that have experienced that, but people that are at risk of, and it is a really real risk in summer. So that's probably something else we need to be thinking about.
And I think that's where your emergency services involvement in this is really imperative as well. Your CFS, if you have a SES, you need to involve them as well, police, but also your local ambulance.
Yeah.
So you need all of them at the table, because I know even now from the Mallala CFS, there's some individuals who actually pack up and leave on the anniversary of Pinery and go elsewhere because they can't handle it. Yeah. So although the CFS are there and these people are all first responders, there's an element of trauma involved for those first responders as well as them doing their ongoing role.
Yeah, and as well as they probably live within that zone as well, so it's kind of a threefold.
Yeah, and then their partners become the counsellors for them when they get home. They offload and debrief. They have debriefings as well. Some of the responders do it better than others, but it impacts on their family life as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So does anyone else? Yep, go John.
Unmute, John.
You're muted, John.
Thanks. I was just listening to Dr. Napoli about having our town as a meeting space, and I see the absolute value in that. And then listening to Karen around the different responses around disaster, I'll just like to see our town as a very proactive place where people can meet and as a real connection for people. Not because we're experts, but we have connections with experts and are able to provide the mental wellbeing supports and connect them to agencies. And so, as Karen said, the response around the disaster is of course different to the ongoing proactive stuff, but I can see the proactive stuff being a real foundation that sits underneath. So when a disaster does come, it's there and people go, oh, our town, let's go there because we know where we can get help.
Yeah. The eCPR stuff sits really well with that too, actually, John. So I think that...
is that similar to mental health first aid or something like that?
It's way less clinical, and it's much more about being present with that person, and that person generally has their own answers, but you're happy to sit and listen to them in that space. So I would hope that as part of this, somewhere along the track, we can actually offer that as a community training. And I'm jumping out of Discovery, I know, ladies, but I would hope that that's something that we could use to upskill community, to whoever wants to do it, CFS, men's sheds, whatever, to use as a tool in that space to be able to sit with people that are in distress or worried or whatever. So I think that would tie really well in, and also with it being a space where people can sit and chat and whatever. Google it, have a look at it. It's very, very different to any mental health training I've done in the past.
They've also developed the community eCPR, so specifically for smaller communities and, building on that resilience and connectedness within the community as well.
Yeah.
I'll certainly hand that back to Wellbeing SA and give them a nudge in terms of some funding.
Oh, me too.
Right, they've been picking my brain for all the participants on the next eCPR from Pinery, so I'll let
well, I've done quite a few different mental health trainings, Karen, and it is very, very different.
Yeah, they've asked me to do it as well.
Yeah, I would have said that I'm really comfortable with my emotions and, I'm very expressive. And let me tell you, in some of those spaces, even I was going, oh, goodness, wow, because it's actually about sharing emotion with people. Very interesting, very, very different to any sort of mental health training I've seen in the past. But certainly in a community space would fit beautifully with anyone that would be willing to do it, I think. So, yeah, worth having a look at.
I guess from just on that point, one of the things that I've actually seen and this just doesn't relate to this project, it's sector wide,
Mhm.
is that I've seen that the prevention side of things has been lost to response research and when somebody's in crisis. And I think there needs to be more of an emphasis, and that training taps into it, Amy, beautifully, where we actually need to pull the focus and draw it back to the preventative space.
Yeah.
And I'm sure our doctor would see the end result. So Stephen, you would see where people are actually at that crisis, and it would be interesting to know your thoughts around how we can actually work more in the preventative space to actually I guess interrupt that process from when they actually get to that point where they're actually in crisis. And I mean, things that I talk to our networks about are like, for example, Black Dog Institute have developed an online clinic where you can go on and run yourself through a series of questions about your own mental health and well-being, and it gives you a series of resources that you can tap into depending on how you answer the questions. Kids Helpline have just released a new app called Niggle for 12-year-olds and above, for kids when they get niggly feelings and they don't know how to navigate them or what to do with them. There's an app now that can actually help them with it. You know, there's this raft of resources that I'm constantly finding out and keeping abreast of that our community don't even know exist. So I guess one of the challenges I see is how can we actually make these fantastic resources that are available and are already funded, how can we actually make them more visible and accessible to communities so that those people who are struggling that low level stuff, actually we're preventing them and possibly helping them in ways where they're not ending up in crisis.
I agree, Simone. I'm sorry,
It's
Karen.
a challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of when there's funding constraints, it quite often moves from upstream stuff to crisis, downstream stuff. You know, people are already in crisis. So I think you've got a really good point. It's really important. And I guess that's what we're trying to do with this program. We're not actually, our town is not about really supporting people when they're in that crisis space so much. It's about actually preventing that from happening and maintaining that well-being. So really good point.
And I think that sort of leads on to perhaps an area that we haven't quite delved into tonight is what actually does already work in our community. Like what sorts of things are people doing within our community to support each other right now that we could perhaps, you know, look at a little more closer or, you know, enhance in some sort of way.
Can I just talk to that point? Because I've made a couple of notes in about, you know, footy and netball clubs. And if you're out in our area, they're like the be all and end all. That's Mecca if you're in the footy club, or, you know, that's how you connect with people in a not so serious way. And schools are often, you know, we are big brother. We're the ones who, you know, point the finger. And I've tried, and it's something that I'm struggling to break into in the Mannum region, is trying to connect with agencies like that who really do, I think, have a huge sway. They have a huge scope to influence the culture of a community, and trying to work with them to establish a common language around mindfulness and mental health and all of that capacity building, because I totally agree, Karen, that prevention and that primary care model is imperative. And we do, a lot of people, I think, automatically leap to there's not enough counsellors, there's not enough outreach, there's not enough, you know, domestic violence support. Well, gee, wouldn't it be great if they didn't have to come because the issues are managed, or at least that we're capacity building. And Mid-Murray Family Connections last year and the year before have been doing a white tie dinner to raise funds for domestic violence support services. But as part of that, have been looking at, you know, men's mental health, which kind of ties into the stuff, Mike, that you're working on. You know, how do we foster healthy male mindset so that we don't have domestic violence? And how do we, you know, enable and empower single women who may be left with the kids to actually, you know, not smoke and drink, you know, as their way of coping with the stress that they're dealing with, you know, so that whether that's in utero, and then we've got, you know, fetal alcohol syndrome or developmental delay issues before the kid even gets out of the womb, we're going to struggle with that, you know, they're going to struggle with that their whole lives. So I think the capacity building's an awesome idea. And in some respects, by the time we get them at school, it's too late, because a lot of that, you know, Stephen, you were talking about the mother-child connection, you know, that first 1,000 days. And yet, you know, it's great to try and connect parents with their kids, but the parents seem to just be lacking capacity to parent. And, you know, to know how to do that in a nurturing and a safe way, because they're struggling with their own issues, whatever.
You're right, Mike. You go.
I've said for many years, I guess, that there's a few things that kids coming out of the school environment are a very important part of their life. Don't get these days anymore, and it's things like driver education, family planning. I guess they do to a certain degree, but things like they do. Parenting classes. Parenting classes, I reckon, should include the kids' parents and their parents, because the kids see normal things happening at home, may not be what you and I have put up with or been brought up with, but that's their normal. And parenting classes are very difficult to get a consistent understanding across the generations. As much as grandparents try to.
Today, Mike, I actually had a health class with year 10s, and the amount of abuse and lip that I copped because I was trying to cover the topic of parenting and how important it is that they think about, you know, the skills that good parents have. And yeah, so yeah, it's a hard ask, but yeah, we're trying.
Yeah. Don't give up.
Thanks, mate.
So, does anyone else have go, Dr. Napoli?
I agree with the comments being made are really all very, very relevant. Looking at long-term structural problems in the community around low employment, low-income families particularly, higher the displacement from their sort of support networks, so they're usually not well connected with their extended families. Mike's referring to the families and connections with grandparents and intergenerational connections and supports, usually the ones more functionally and generally children are in a better place. But often these families we're talking about are usually very isolated and don't have those connections and supports. We talk about long-term isolation, transport issues. Talk about literacy and educational levels. So the families we're particularly referring to, with the children at highest risk, have many levels of long-term structural, you could say, or systemic barriers to their well-being. So it can be overwhelming to think, where do you start? But I think it's important to start somewhere. And that's what we're trying to do. And looking at what everyone's talking about in a preventative approach, to agree 100%, Karen, what you're saying is that we could spend the rest of eternity fixing at the end stage, or trying to manage the end stage crises and actually not change anything. So, and that's the whole concept around community preventative health approach. And everyone here, I think, believes very passionately in that sort of level of engaging where people are at and bringing about connection, bringing about meaningful empowerment, and engaging with services, but also helping them identify where they can gather support for themselves, and the concepts you're talking about, Bobby, around capacity building, and particularly the younger connections that we can make with like families at a younger stage, or even at school level, where they're not even that's sort of a captive space, and where there's a way of building the connections between these families who are at risk. I'm not sure how best that occurs, but at least giving young people a voice in the community. We're talking about how best that takes place, and maybe there's opportunities in the school environment where they could even potentially have it as part of their current subjects, and there could be children themselves who become the leaders by volunteering as spokespeople for the other youth. So there's many levels we could talk about this, but I think it's important that we are talking about it and we're looking at breaking these cycles and what we can do to make it a place that people themselves can identify the needs that they have and make a change for themselves, be that the adults, the children, or whatever level that people can be engaged at.
Thank you. So I guess we're at the point where we're going to put it out there to say, you know, is there anyone here that is happy to jump on board one of our teams to actually help drive this work?
One of what teams, Amy?
Well, either the core team or the outer team. We're not sure how the structure is going to work, Bobby, but we definitely will start with a core team, and then we kind of anticipate that there'll be a circle sort of around that will help with all sorts of different things, guidance, with stepping in to help when we need it, you know, all sorts of different things. But we've got to get some feet on the ground to, you know, help us have these conversations with community, help us look at data, help us look at the literature, however that may be. And in, you know, whatever capacity, I'm conscious people are really busy. So in whatever capacity people can do, we would really welcome, you know, and conversations like these where we've come up with all these other things that we hadn't necessarily thought about, that we can then work out from there how we're going to use that information.
Amy, I'm happy to, for people to tap into me and contact me in terms of if any barriers arrive when you're dealing with government agencies in terms of wanting information like PIRSA or anyone like that. I have access to 23 senior executives from every government agency on suicide prevention. That's what our office does. So if there's any barriers or challenges in terms of accessing information from government, if you're wanting contacts for various people across the sector, or have got any ideas of who you would like to contact, happy to provide that advice if I can. In terms of, I think it would be beneficial for your core group and even your outer group to look towards the Life in Mind National Communications Charter around safe use in language for when talking about mental health and suicide. That's a really beneficial charter that people can sign up to, individual or collectively. Both of our Premiers Council and our Issues Group have all signed it. We've currently got a 50% uptake of members of Parliament going to sign that, hopefully, fingers crossed. But it's a really important charter in terms of you know, moving away from the word commit suicide, why we're doing that, that it does have certain triggers for people in community who have lived experience of suicide, you know, all of those sorts of things. It's actually a really good tool. So
can I just check, Karen, you cut out a little bit. Did you say Life in Mind?
Yeah, so it's the Life in Mind National Communications Charter.
Okay.
If you can't find it, just email me, I'll send you the link. But I think that's really imperative for a project like this.
Yeah.
In terms of data, I was contacted by one of the health commissioners in terms of suicide data for regions, and I'm having a conversation around with all of the towns that are involved in the project in terms of just mindful of how that data is used and put out into communities.
Of course.
Because there can be conclusions drawn in terms of, and if that data is going out into communities, it can be re-triggering for some people. And if you're meeting by means like this and not in physical form, it can be harder to provide supports to people if they are triggered. So I just caution the use of data and how that actually occurs.
Yeah.
But other than that, look, I'm happy for you to contact me. I'm happy to provide input and advice where I can, and be of support. Obviously, I can't support you more than any of the others, but certainly I'll do my best. I do have a bit of a passion. I lived at Blanchetown for 2 years, so.
And different insights from different people, Karen. That's what we need, you know, like we need all those different components to pull together that richness. So that's all really good information. Thank you.
But unfortunately, I have to jump off now because I've got another meeting. But you know, really grateful for everyone's input and involvement. And I think you know, you're doing a fantastic job. I could just encourage you all to keep forging ahead, keep going. As the Honourable John Dawkins said 16 years ago, you know, he's persisted for 17 years in suicide prevention. And, you know, it's taken a long time to get there. But I think if you look 17 or even 10 years ago, the stigma around mental health and suicide, I think we're gradually breaking it down. We're not there yet. We've still got a lot more to do, but we're certainly making inroads into getting there.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for giving us the time tonight.
No worries, you're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Karen.
Bye.
I think one thing that we really need to highlight in this space is that we're very much trying to set the Our Town space up to be a place where it's not onerous on any one person, and that people can come and go as, you know, either time permits, or, you know, even just making sure that the people within the Our Town space have the space to be able to step away if they need to. You know, we're certainly going to hear a lot of things that may, you know, be quite heavy on us, or things going on in our own personal lives, things like that. So, you know, we're definitely, while we'd love someone to fully come on and, you know, be as involved as, you know, we are, we understand that that's not actually possible for everyone. So, you know, it could even just be some introductions to some people, families, kids, you know, that you think would be able to share a lot of insight to us, and give us an idea of what's really going on in our community.
Or having conversations, you know, like Mike, having a chat at the men's shed with people about what do they do, how do they look after themselves, you know, or what might be helpful for gaps, you know, what are they looking for? All, you know, even those sort of impromptu things, that's what we need, is all of that information. You know, I wonder in a school space whether we could even organise to come and visit the schools and just have a really general chat with children about sort of things you do that make you happy. You know, it doesn't have to be, I'm conscious with younger children, I don't want to be focusing too much, you know, on the word mental health and, you know, all of those things, but around, you know, what do you do to make you happy? What things do your family do on the weekends that you have fun with, or whatever it is? We'd have to, you know, draft those things up, but it might be a good way to get some of those people's thoughts. You're right, Mike.
There is good data. So there is good data already, because we do have a wellbeing and engagement collection, which has really good data already in it about wellbeing right down to year 4.
Okay. So would we be able to access that, Bobby?
I think it's a public document, but it's at the moment only by site. If you wanted to have a generic across a partnership, I think, which is multiple schools, you'd need to talk to Stan.
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah. Sorry, Bobby, what did you actually say its name was?
It's called the Wellbeing and Engagement Collection. and it covers a whole range. It's primarily about mental health and well-being.
Okay.
And talks about in school and out of school, about close relationships, about resilience, expectations for success, so aspirational stuff, but really, you know, fundamental things about, do they have people they trust? Do they have a friendship network? It's quite good. It's sadly, I don't know, John, whether you got any finished this year, but we were all booked to do it in week 8 to 10 in term 1, which is when it all got deprioritised. But there's a lot of other data, and it will be collected over the coming years. So it's a great snapshot.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. I'll try and chase them up with Stan. What were you going to say, Mike?
You're tabling a lot of initiatives that maybe your hired person might want to pick up on. It's certainly part of the job description, I guess, that you're
Absolutely, it is.
listing to do.
Yeah.
But can I suggest that if you want to survey the whole of the Mid-Murray community to see what is going well for them and what they really miss as far as a service or support goes, use your local media. You've got some funding to probably offer some sort of novel prize or a reward, and build on the kids to take it home and do it with the parents. The parents can have some input into it as well and drive it back through the school. The school is a great tap into every family that's got young kids, and encourage the young kids to get to the grandparents as well. So you're going to touch base with hopefully the majority of the community.
Thank you. I'm a bit, we never seem to have much luck with surveys. I have to admit, people tend to just go, I'm not doing that. It may be something that we might look at. And definitely the person that we engage will hopefully be driving some of that forward. But I am conscious too that they're not going to be someone, you know, coming into the men's shed that already has those connections. So, you know, if we've got on the ground people as well, I think that, you know, the information you could share with us would be a lot more rich than someone coming in and having a chat with people, you know. So we're trying to sort of cover, you know, all those bases.
Okay.
I'm thinking in the schools, you could, I mean, if we leveraged off a particular day of significance or a period of significance, and you know, the schools are going to do activities around that thing anyway, it's a fairly easy thing to get kids engaged with. And National Families Week is in, I'm just looking at the dates for it. It's been modified this year and pushed back to October.
Yeah.
So things like that, whether it be the first week back in term 4, for example, if it was something that was promoted through schools, we could easily ask questions or get kids to, you know, do it as a little mini family connection project.
Yeah.
And we could certainly harvest out of that, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Even going to the, sorry, Jamie. Even going to the kindy kids, I know we did as part of the one of the consultations where we put a big piece of butcher's paper up and said, what's your favourite thing to do with your family, or, you know, what's the funnest thing in your work, you know, and we wrote things down and got this visual kind of, you know, it was kind of cool that they, you know, and they were only really little, but, you know, they got to give a little bit of input into that.
Yep.
Sorry, Jamie, you jump in there.
I was just going to say that Mike's idea to have a little reward or, you know, some sort of an incentive, because like I said, Ames, we traditionally haven't had fantastic responses, and we're very much speaking from a council perspective at this point. But yeah, you know, putting those community surveys out there, if there is a little bit of incentive, and even, you know, thinking outside the box to outside of traditional survey type things like, you know, I remember seeing the Our Town Clouds on a poster, and, you know, I think in the very, very initial stages talking about, you know, getting people that are just walking by to write down how they're feeling on that day. You know, that in itself can provide a whole lot of insight as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I have to admit, with the Children's Centre survey consultation, we did have a much better uptake with a prize, Mike. So very good suggestion. We did, I don't know, it was $100 gift voucher or something, but yeah. But yeah, I really like actually your idea of people writing in the clouds too, Jamie. Or, you know,
Men's Shed make really, really good breadboards.
I missed that. What was that, Bobby?
The Men's Shed make really good breadboards.
Oh, be a wonderful prize. Is that where you're going? I really like the idea too of your cloud suggestion, Jamie. You know, even if we put a sign up that said, tell us one thing you do to look after your well-being, you know, so yeah. Well, I feel like we've had a really good session. I'm actually kind of pleased that it was smaller because it's given us a chance to, you know, do some of that brainstorming and have a really good chat. So look, if there's, you know, if people can be involved in any way, please, you know, shoot us an email, give us a call, whatever it is, you know, and as we said, people can come in, come out, you know, offer something, then off again, you know, we're happy to accept whatever people can contribute with their very time poor schedules. And yeah, we'll be working on engaging someone will be our next kind of aim, I think.
Yeah, we just to let you all know, one of the key challenges that we're having is that, you know, we most certainly want this to be community led, and of course, you know, it was Mid-Murray Council that applied for the grant on behalf of our community, and we're looking to be able to, you know, have that funding held within the community rather than with council, so that it gives that meaningful community-led, you know, spirit, I suppose, rather than being tied up with some of our council red tape. Just close your ears, Simone. You know, so we're having conversations with community groups and those sorts of things, but that's certainly been a very big challenge for us. And we can't spend the money retrospectively, so we need to be able to sort that out before we can actually take on the step to engage someone on a permanent basis, or, you know, semi-permanent basis. But we're really keen to get that rolling. I think, you know, between Amy, Leah and I, we've been putting in some pretty phenomenal hours with the different bits and pieces that are going on, you know, not just within Mid-Murray, but, you know, collectively with all 6 our town groups and with the support partners and things like that. So, you know, if anyone's definitely got any ideas, we're open to listening.
Thank you, Jamie. Oh, you're right, Mike, jump in.
Leah has approached the Men's Shed to take on that role of holding the funding and be co-signer of payment of bills and what have you. And it was discussed amongst our committee, and it was felt that we really didn't have the financial nous.
That's absolutely fine, Mike.
And there were questions coming up like, if you're going to hire someone, what do they get their bills? Is there GST involved? Is there tax?
Yeah.
And we really was floundering, and that's
It's absolutely fine, Mike. You can support us in other ways. We are in conversations. Actually, I have to thank you, Bobby. We are in conversations with Centacare. So Bobby mentioned before that through the South Working Group of Family Connections, we do a white tie dinner and raise some money, and Centacare actually hold that money for us. And I hadn't actually thought about it. And then Bobby actually said to me in a different meeting the other day, we went a bit off topic, and so I have spoken with Gail, Bobby. She was pretty keen, so she's gone to finance armed with the information I've given her to try and see if they'll come to the table with that. So fingers crossed that will work. Yeah. So I think unless anybody else has anything else they want to suggest or talk about or whatever, I think we're pretty good to go. Thank you all so much for coming. I might hand, are you All right, Leah. I was just going to hand over you to close the meeting, and I thought, you're not looking at me. If I do that, you're going to go, what's going on here? Okay, thank you.
No, I can hear you. Yeah, so I guess I'm just going to say thank you for coming. It's been invaluable, really, and I too am glad it was a small number, so I really appreciate your time. If anybody's got any other questions, now would be the time. We're happy to stay a bit longer, but you can email us, text us, you know, whatever, however you want to get messages to us. And if you have any ideas at all, just hit us up with them for sure. So thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you all.
Bye.
Hey, everybody.
See ya.